We thought at the time it was a great idea. Oh, if you combine your work and your play, then you're just playing all the time. You're actually just working all the time, so you have to totally like refine balance.
Welcome to Midland Money Mindset, your weekly dose of inspiration and insights to ensure you enjoy each step of your journey. Whether you're saving for the future, planning your next big adventure, or simply looking to add more joy to your life, you've come to the right place. Now, let's dive in.
Too many of us trade our dreams for comfort, clocking in each day while our creativity fades. Collin Strachan refused to live life that way. He walked away from corporate life, moved his family off-grid to Alaska, and built Every Mile Creative, the powerhouse behind the viral ads for Dude Wipes, Solo Stove, and Ridge Wallet. Now, through his Become Unforgettable community, Collin teaches entrepreneurs how to turn bold stories into thriving brands. His journey proves that when you lead with courage and creativity, freedom and fulfillment can become your greatest return on investment. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Midland Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Midland Financial. Let's dive into the show. Well, I am super excited to have Collin Strachan from Alaska Production Company and Every Mile Creative. Welcome to the show, Collin.
Yeah, it's good to meet you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited for this. You live in a part of the world that I am envious of. I love Alaska, and we're going to be talking about that. And we're going to be talking a lot about what you do today at Every Mile Creative. But before we jump in and do that, our listeners are just really enamored by the entrepreneurial journey and, how people get to where they are. And, it's usually not a traditional path. But I was hoping for a few minutes you can share a little bit about your journey up into founding Every Mile Creative, and then we'll dive into what you're doing today.
Yeah, that sounds good. So you're right, totally non-traditional paths. So my wife and I run a little production company in Alaska. So if you search Alaska Production Company or Every Mile Creative, will come up either way. And we create scroll-stopping, like really, really epic ads for brands who basically run ads online. So for example, this spring, Dude Wipes got in touch and we put a toilet on a helicopter and flew it out to an ice cave and made a commercial. So wild stuff like that you wouldn't expect. Right out of college, I got an agency job in Dallas, Texas. I grew up in Texas, actually. And my wife was working in the NICU at a big children's hospital down there and just kind of like living a traditional life. And there was just a weekend that we both had free, kind of in the midst of everything. And somehow I got onto some site where you could, just click like one-way flights. And we saw a $50 flight to LA where we were able to leave at like 6 a.m. and come back at 9 p.m. or something like that. And we were like, let's do something really crazy and fun. And that we caught a bug in LA for traveling. And it kind of just like expanded our horizons for two kids who had, hardly been west of the Mississippi. Obviously, I grew up in Texas, but she had not. She was from Pennsylvania. And we wanted to travel, and I had been taking I was doing like multimedia work at this agency. I had been taking a lot of work on the side. I'd been doing like weddings and corporate photo video stuff and stuff like that, and realized that I was making more on weekends and evenings than I was with the job. And then she realized that she could do travel nursing. So we said, let's jump and do it. So I jumped and went into just, kind of from my network doing corporate, remote video type of stuff. And she took a travel nursing contract in California. We spent a summer out there and then realized that it was insane to do 3-month leases in apartments as we moved around. So we got an Airstream, took it down to Utah. And then kind of in the midst of all that, we were up in the mountains and exploring and just, pushing ourselves to get into these really beautiful places. And I'd always been doing photo. So we just started going, well, what if we, just kind of like capture our adventure. So it was basically what is very popular now, which was become Instagram photographers. So, we created an account and we go and we email all the brands that you would think of, all the outdoor gear brands, stuff like that. When we were in Utah, we actually put together like a little brochure and just walked into offices and we're like, hey, we got to talk to the marketing team, and they let us. And so, got together some contracts and just put together hey, we're going to travel and go to these cool places and we'll take pictures for you. And people jumped on it. They thought the story was unique week. And so that's kind of what started this whole thing. Is we started traveling around this Airstream and capturing photos and creating for brands to use across all their advertising, so social channels and paid and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was 5 or 6 years of full time in the Airstream, and in the middle of that, we kept wandering further and further north. So we wound up in Park City, Utah, and then we wound up in Wyoming, and then we wound up in Washington, and my wife, Kendall, was following some elopement photographers on Instagram, actually, who were up in Alaska, getting on helicopters and going out to glaciers and putting their pack rafts and paddling with icebergs and stuff. And she was just like, can we go to Alaska? I was like, yeah, let's go to Alaska. All of this, adds a little more excitement to it. Was like, 2020 was in the mix of this. And so we had like a bunch of work lined up for 2020 and it all completely disappeared. So while it was amazing, it was also very much just broke all the time and get a $500 little job here and great, we can go for another week or a tank of gas. So I wouldn't recommend it, but we just were really, really in love with what we were doing and believed in what we were creating for some crazy reason. So yeah, kept traveling, wound up in Alaska, and we were just going to stay. Basically, we sold a bunch of contracts. A bunch of brands got excited about coming up to Alaska. So we came up and we were just going to stay for the summer, but we stayed through the fall, which was really beautiful. And then we were like, well, basically we stayed too long to go back south through Canada, but you can't tow down those roads. And so he said, okay, we're going to stay for the winter. So we're in our Airstream off grid, cutting our own wood to heat, stuff like that. It was modified. And all of a sudden it's just -20 for just weeks and weeks. So they had this crazy cold snap and it kicked our butts, but it kind of like gave us this resilience and we turned it into a story and a strength. And so, we were building my wife's Instagram account and messaging all these brands that you'd expect, and people jumped on it. And so we kept going with the content game, which is what we do. Yeah. So yeah, that was a couple years. And then more recently in the last couple years, I started to see kind of the writing on the wall, more and more and more people. Now it doesn't sound unique that you're an Instagram travel photographer. And so our contacts at the brands, started telling us, oh, we still read your emails, but we get 200 pitches a day or whatever it was. And so I thought, how do we take this ability to create, attention capturing images that we know how to sell products with, to do the content, our, unique kind of differentiating factor in that we focus only on Alaska and these really crazy environments, and how do we kind of transition that into different markets? So that's what we're doing today, and that's ultimately, we can go further into this. Why we're working with, SaaS brands or dude wipes or stuff like that. So it's really cool, and that brought me to LinkedIn, which is where we connected. So, but that's kind of the journey we took. Started wandering in an Airstream and wound up here and stayed.
Amazing. What an entrepreneurial journey. One of the things that I find that people struggle with is, right, they have that corporate job, which a lot of times they feel is safe, right? Yeah. And they maybe start dabbling in other things like you started out and, maybe have even more passion for the things that they're doing away from the corporate job. At the end of the day, what was like the inflection point for you that said, hey, I'm out of this corporate job and this is really where my passion is and I'm moving on?
Yeah, I think everybody is going to have a really different inflection point. I know some people that plan and they put things together and they get a 90-day runway and stuff like that. And that's their path. For me, it was less prepared. I had some crazy health stuff. We did not think I was going to live past my teens growing up. Oh, wow. So I kind of already feel like I'm on my second shot. And when I realized that I was selling kind of prime time to someone else and that, he would start calling and saying, hey, could you work this weekend? And, oh, there's extra and I'm up till 11 o'clock and stuff like that. I thought, this is not worth these years for quote certainty, because I don't really believe in certainty, having experienced so much uncertainty myself. So that's what I always say. It's really hard, especially, if you're in the media world like this. We just completely bottomed out financially, which I don't recommend, but it gave us the grit and the desperation to get over the hump and do it. And I think that's why 98% of businesses like ours fail, is that people, they don't keep going going through abject failure until they find the success, because they shouldn't, because they can't, because they have kids or family or mortgage or whatever. And our situation was such that we could literally sit in the woods off grid and ride it out. So yeah, I think for me, it was really looking at the hours increased without commensurate pay. And I realized that if I spend more time or leverage my time better, that I can, create more freedom and opportunity for myself. And then now that I'm a parent, I absolutely don't regret with that. I wanted to buy my time back and be home. And same for my wife, who was working 12-hour shifts at the hospital. I just thought we can do more with our time.
And how's your health now? Is that resolved itself, or still a challenge for you?
It's not so much a challenge now. It was largely, as I've learned, nutrition and environment and stress base, had a bit of a tumultuous upbringing and was consuming way too much processed food and stuff like that. So it was as a result of systemic inflammation. I think my body was genetically more predisposed to it, but we take good care of our bodies now. And so I don't really have any issues with that.
I read Casey Means Good Energy, and that was a game changer for me. So
that book is huge.
I'm sure, being out in the outdoors, was really your health, was that really what drove your focus to focusing your firm on the outdoors? Was it because it helped you personally and was good for business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's because we both were just developed like an allergy to incandescent lighting was what happened with myself and my wife. It's funny. My wife grew up believing that you need to lay out a blanket on the grass and that mud was evil. She was just like as clean and anti-dirt as possible. She had to do athletics in high school, so she chose golf because she expected that they would be able to use the golf carts, and was devastated when she realized you had to walk the carts. She fell into the wrong crowd in college, though, and started doing ultra marathons in the Appalachians.
Oh, wow.
And so kind of our whole relationship, we met through a running group, friends running together. And so our whole kind of shtick together has always been in the mountains and on the go. And so we just started kind of playing bigger and better with those environments and capturing in those environments. We thought at the time it was a great idea. Oh, if you combine your work and your play, then you're just playing all the time. You're actually just working all the time. So you have to totally like refine balance. But it was kind of just giving us any excuse that we can to be in the mountains rather than in an office.
Yeah. You traveled around quite a bit, as you said, stopping, making all these stops along the way, traveling north, and then kind of finally setting up, quote unquote home initially in Alaska. But, ultimately you decided to relocate there, and you've been there for a while now. How did it come to be that you decided, hey, this is our final stop?
Alaska, for us, it's interesting. There's a climate part of it. We don't like temperatures above 75 degrees, so we don't have to deal with that. We don't mind temperatures below zero, so there's a good balance there. For us, having traveled all over the Southwest, having spent a lot of time in California, a lot of time in Washington and stuff like that, when we came to Alaska, we've yet to meet someone who wouldn't just give a stranger the shirt off their back. So the people in the community, we really, really quickly found ourselves making friends because people would just come up to us and make friends with us in ways that didn't happen in those other places. And so the roots settled in quickly. And then as far as the work goes, the response to that and people's buy-in on what we were creating was so much higher that we saw opportunity there. And then, once you get the high of some of the ice climbing and paddling with icebergs, and you're driving along and there's like a pod of belugas just, right next to the truck in the water, and some of the crazy stuff that you see, we go elsewhere. And there's a couple other places that we really like, but our hearts just kind of like, they set up shop here, and that was that.
Yeah, I guess you're never going to a zoo again, because after I went to South Africa, went on safari, I was like, why would I ever go to a zoo again? It's similar to your everyday living out there, with the animals and the imagery. And, when people think about Alaska and they think about the imagery that you've shared with us thus far and the animals, all these things as the backdrop, if I'm sitting in the audience or I'm listening, I'm thinking, oh, they must be working with Patagonia or REI, the traditional. But as you mentioned, your clients are brands like Dude Wipes and Celsius, right?
Yeah.
Why is that instead of those other more traditional Alaskan imagery type companies, if you will?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons. We worked with most of the big names in the outdoor space for a number of years. And the couple of things, just economically, with social media and the advent of that and the number of people that travel, their access to high quality user generated content that works really well for their brands is just almost unlimited. And they ultimately, over the last 5 or 10 years, people have really, really kind of locked in on what their formula for their channels is. And then they consolidated internal teams that could create content at scale more economically than hiring us per contract. So it just became more commoditized and there was less just, economic opportunity with those types of brands, as well as less buy-in and wow factor and everything. Cause they're like, yeah, we climb the mountains. We've got our, pro athletes, on top of Everest or whatever it is. So it was a little more expected. And so we realized, okay, the biggest thing that drove our business to the point that it did and continues to is that wow factor, that, emotional response that our customer who's in an office somewhere, usually looking for something that stands out has, and they go, whoa, this story is crazy. The visuals are crazy. So we just realized, okay, that's going to be, in different places. So the move that I made actually was to stop emailing outdoor brands and doing cold outreach and go and build a presence on LinkedIn and build inbound inreach and just surround myself with people who are buying marketing from all over the place. And what I found really quickly is that when I started sharing concepts and talking about what we're doing and stuff like that, people in the finance world, people in the tech world, people in the food and bev space, whatever, started going, what could you do for us? This is crazy. We love following the story. And we just started, kind of coming up with fun ideas and going, how would you market, TurboTax? Okay, you'd make a funny video about a guy who ran off to live off grid in Alaska to avoid an audit or whatever. And TurboTax shows up and says, hey, you don't have to do this. We can help you through it. Whatever. Square, a mountain climber finds a coffee shop on top of a mountain. You can process payments anywhere. So we started coming up with ideas like this and putting stuff out there and connecting with those brands. And they came in naturally because they went, well, dang, this is going to be such a pattern disrupt in our industry that people are going to have to stop and look and ask questions. So that's how that shift happened.
Hey, listen, it makes so much sense. You went to the blue ocean where, people would benefit and understand the power of what you do. So that was great. Whereas those other companies, they're just like you said, user-generated content from people posting stuff is probably more than they need. Let's pause for a moment. What actually brings you joy? It's something most people never think about, yet it shapes how your life unfolds. You're busy. You make responsible choices. You even plan ahead. But have you slowed down long enough to ask if what you're building supports a life you enjoy living? That's the reason I built my YouTube channel, to help you bring more joy to your money journey. Sure, we'll talk about all the essentials, but my real goal is to help you connect your finances with what brings you joy, because money is the tool that funds the moments that matter. If you want to explore that connection more deeply, visit my YouTube channel at Larry Sprung. One of the things you said earlier also was about the economics around some of those companies. And, I want to talk a little bit about your we don't negotiate price policy. And I like that. And I think that there's a lot to be learned there. What do you think other entrepreneurs can learn from the power of being upfront with your potential client customer and saying, we don't negotiate price? What are the benefits there?
So the core lesson for us here, especially if you're in a creative type of space or any type of, service-based business where the service is really customized to your client, that can be really, really difficult to have people clearly understand and articulate what the return for what you do is. And in my experience, especially building a completely inbound sales system, and I coach people how to build brands on LinkedIn as well now. And what my experience is, the more specific and clear and data driven you can be with your results, the more likely your customer is to understand and see themselves in their shoes and see potential return. So we looked at years of client relationships and realized kind of what the best possible outcome for us and for the client was. And we realized that anytime that we have made a productized offer where we say, here's the structure, here's exactly what you do, here's exactly what you're going to get, here's what you can expect from it, and here's exactly the price, that one, they understand it much more clearly. They're able to make a decision about what they're going to purchase. And two, they typically spend 30% more than your base price for it. That's just our experience, because it sparks new ideas. And so I'm always, messing with language and stuff like that. And I'm actually doing some, after this, I'm doing some coaching with someone who does kind of high ticket funnels. So we'll see if that exact language stays, but the sentiment absolutely stays, in that I have just taken, more than 100 discovery calls where we put together pitches and we kind of do all these, actions to try to win business. And then I read a book called The Win Without Pitching Manifesto, which was really, really valuable. And it kind of just showed, like, when you're doing discovery calls and pitches and concepts and trying to, haggling back and forth and budget and stuff like that, it forces you into this client relationship where the client has to play the role, is expected to play the role of skeptic, and we're against each other. And so what I'm looking for, and it's a really needle in the haystack client, but I don't need a lot of them to have a really good business, is a brand who spends quite a lot of money in their paid channels, usually more than $100,000 a month, but they're making millions per month from that, and understands the value of really, really quality creative. And so our best relationship looks like, hey, this is our brand. Can you do something? Yes, I can. Cool. They do it. And then once the money stuff is figured out, then we work on the creative. And so I try to pre-qualify as much as possible and have people go, if you don't clearly understand, if this doesn't feel valuable, if you're not sure that you can afford it, it's not trying to be standoffish. It's trying to say, if you are using content exceptionally well and you're seeing returns, I'll put fuel on that fire for you. And my focus is on 10 to 100x return on your investment with me, and not on kind of like, figuring out, can we save 1,000 or 2 here, because it's a bigger conversation than that. So that's my experience. And then, from when I've learned to people who are running bigger organizations, one of the things that they look for that indicates a vendor who's really capable of servicing a large organization who has really high standards is that they have a really, really tight vetting process. So that actually subtly qualifies, hey, I'm kind of like looking for 100 million plus brands who know what's going on. I'm ready to jump in, be part of your team. You can trust me to execute, and then you can, trust this creative to work for you. So that's what I'm signaling, and I'm qualifying, and I'm saving time with clients that aren't ready for what we do, which is okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to be right for everyone. We had a family, I tell this story, that he was in the process of thinking about moving forward with us. We felt like him and his family were a good fit. Mm-hmm. And he started haggling with one of my wealth advisors on price. Yeah. And he didn't feel comfortable having the conversation. So I got on the phone and he asked me to reduce our price. And I said, I just politely asked him, I said, you were at the office like 2 days ago. I said, did you see any used cars in our office? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, this isn't a used car lot. We deliver on our promises. Yeah. We add tremendous value, and we don't haggle on price. So I said, this is the way it is if you want to work with us and get the value, because we know what he was getting today was not what he needed. Long story short is he moved forward with us at our agreed price. And after about 3 months of working together, he came up to us and he said, you know what? I understand why I'm paying more than I was paying before. And I'm getting so much more value that I would have expected you almost to even charge me more. So it makes sense. And you don't have to be right to everyone. So kudos to you. So I want to pivot for a second about, working with your wife, because this is something that I've asked a few prior guests this question, because I work with my wife. She's our chief marketing officer. And, I'm always fascinated by other, entrepreneurs who are working with their spouse. For you, what has it been like to found a company with your wife, and what advice do you have for other couples that might be either considering this or are already, well into working together in their company venture?
Yeah, my advice is don't get yourself wound up in a situation like this where you have to talk publicly on the record. No. About living with your wife in a 33-foot tin can for 5 years trying to start a business. Doing it with my wife has been, one, an incredible privilege. Two, I'm more the type B person in our relationship. Neither of us fits super well into that category, but she has kind of been a yin to my yang and the opposite. She has a real passion and this ability to remember why we started in the first place that keeps us going, and an eye for excellence that's been really good. The cool thing about a spouse is that, the more constructive and direct your feedback can be to help you be better, the better you're going to get. And a spouse typically is pretty like unabridged with their words. They're just going to say the problems.
Right.
So that's been really good because it's created a kind of a positive feedback loop for us where I think if you have, and I haven't had this experience in my own life because I started with my wife. But I wonder if it's possible to end up in a, founder relationship where you're trying to maintain a friendship or whatever it is. And, everything just kind of has to work. And so it makes you deal with the hard stuff. So that was for us. And then, being in our Airstream and living in this confined space where you can't go stomp off to the den or, whatever it is, like
especially in winter.
Yeah. We are there together, battling the elements. You have to figure it out. It was a stressor for us, but are also really, really made us just figure out how to resolve problems well, how to hear each other, all of that. It's absolutely something we're still working on. We'll celebrate 7 years here soon. So still young. Thank you. But yeah, I think it's an awesome privilege. And when I see couples do it extraordinarily well, I think it's one of the most motivating things. So we're always inspired by the Chip and Joanna Gaines, of the world who just balance each other well.
Yeah, I know one, and this might be one of those things that helps you do this, right, and keep things so solid. But I know that you build your days around being able to have breakfast with your family,
yes.
right? So
yeah.
I imagine that helps. Why was that such a non-negotiable for you?
There's just no point, especially being in a creative business. There is no point for the amount of kind of suffering and heartbreak that we've gone through to get here, and that we still have to go through at times to not come away with a lifestyle that you want. So I'm not building a business to exit it. A lot of people ask me, are you going to scale this? Whatever. And it's a business that's worth its revenue to us. There's key man risk, all that type of stuff. And that's okay. We both have good life insurance policies. So if something happens, then they're taken care of. But the entire point was to live a meaningful life together, to find inspiration, to bring it to people. But most importantly, to create a family. So yeah, I get up at 4:30. I have a quiet time. I do deep work in the morning, and then I have breakfast with my family, and then we go out and we move and all of that, and then I do deep work while kids sleep in the afternoon. And so we move our schedule around that, and I've just learned to be really, really strict because when I'm optimizing for business success, then that's all I'm focused on. And you end up burning out because you could just endlessly do that. Different strokes for different folks. But for me, I'm optimizing for a life well lived. And so that's the whole reason that we're here. And it's the entire reason why we chose entrepreneurship.
Yeah, sounds joyful to me, So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I just want to pivot for a second because, you talked about LinkedIn. Right. Mm-hmm. You're building your audience on there. And I believe Kendall is using Instagram. Clearly these, content has really helped your brands, grow. And, what was the impetus or the thought process around the different platforms? Because, you hear a lot of times people talking to entrepreneurs, hey, find a platform, lean into it, learn it, et cetera. But it seems like you're doing, a great job with you leaning into LinkedIn and Kendall using Instagram. What's the secret sauce for you guys?
So with Instagram, which is where she started, I have one that I don't use much, but it's where she's built a following. Basically, her MO was create a journal of this life that we've lived that we can look back and reflect on, and we can take our kids through the story of us in a way. And that took off. So we don't, while we do, take contracts with brands or whatever, we don't sell that space on Instagram. That's totally just an organic space for us where we share our story and our travels and living in Alaska. And so now her whole focus is on being an adventure mom in Alaska. So we're out ice skating on frozen lakes and stuff like that. And people resonate with that. So I just stayed off of Instagram for a while just because I will just get on and doom scroll. So it's not as healthy a platform for me. And I did the photography and the editing or whatever. And so we just tag teamed building her account. But that's, 90% her. With LinkedIn, what we realized is that you could have a significantly higher concentration of your ideal customer at your fingertips, and they elect to tell you who they are. So you can go and add them by clicking on a company and finding, oh, here's the marketing director I'm looking for. So just the quality of the people there was really great. And I've always enjoyed writing. And so LinkedIn is very, very writing driven. And so I found that I naturally had a knack for that rather than being kind of like an entertainer, as Instagram and TikTok typically lean more toward. So the reason why I kind of jumped into LinkedIn is like I alluded to before, we were doing all cold outreach. So, 1,000 plus emails a month. And we just saw diminishing returns on that. You can do it well, but like I said, the conversations I was having with the brands was just like, hey, there's just more and more people doing this. And we realized that some of the best clients that came along were ones that we would never have prospected. And so my question was, how do I put myself in front of people who are thinking about and buying marketing so that I can spark the idea in their mind and they can come to me. And LinkedIn was naturally the place to do that. And so I came and I started writing there. And what I started doing was talking about what we do. And I started trying to share my expertise and convince people that I was the one adventure photographer who really understood paid channels and creating content that converted and all that type of stuff. And basically I posted into the void for 6 months. But fortunately, I had read something that said, if you stick with LinkedIn for 7 months, the returns will be outsized. So I was just like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing this. Right about 6 months in, I wrote a post that inspired people instead of educated people, and it popped off. And then a friend came along and kind of pointed that out to me and wrote another one. And my mindset just completely changed. And I realized, you know what? You can lead with story. People love reading about people building a business and jumping to entrepreneurship and resilience and grit and tenacity and sticking with it, and the comeback kid stories from being broke and all this type of stuff. And so that's kind of what I switched my brand to, top of funnel. Was this story of building a really, really unexpected business on LinkedIn and prioritizing family. Like everybody, that really stands out to people. Like, I'm not going to grind myself to death. I'm going to prioritize breakfast with my kids, things like that. So I started just kind of reflecting on my values and my experience rather than trying to do any education top of funnel. And it popped off. And so a few 100,000 people per week usually read my stuff. And I've grown to, by the time this episode is out, it would be around 20,000 followers.
Wow. Amazing.
And yeah, it's been fun, and it's allowed me to connect with a lot of people who buy marketing and, drive inbound for our business.
Sure.
So those two platforms, one of them is kind of a journal, and it's, connected with CPG brands and stuff like that. But it oftentimes just adds proof as people go and research with us. And then LinkedIn is really designed to be an inbound machine for the two businesses that we have.
Yeah. Great delineation there. And I appreciate you clarifying that. And, this conversation has brought me a lot of joy. I love Alaska. And we end each of our shows asking our guests the same final question. And that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success? Because we're all about joy on the Midland Money Mindset.
Yeah. So this morning, this is a shameless plug as well as something that really brought me joy. So the other thing that I do is I basically accidentally started a business where I coach people how to build a brand on LinkedIn without talking about LinkedIn based on what I do. And this morning, I checked into that community and I saw a win from someone who's been really, really struggling to communicate what they do. And we reworked their brand and their message, and they were getting some messages and engagement. They were just like all caps sending a message to me saying, thank you for this. And that made me just feel really, really excited. So my number one mission across any platform that I have is just inspire people. And that brings me joy. And I really, really feel joyful when people come back and tell me that I inspired them. So I got a message like that today, and it kind of made my day. And then I had breakfast with my kids and worked out, and we went outside. And so more or less stuck with my values. I'm always trying to do better. But yeah.
Yeah, sounded like a great way to kick off the day. So thank you for sharing that. Now, Collin, we're going to have all the information for you as well as Every Mile Creative in the show notes. But if people want to learn more about you, learn more about what you're doing, connect with you, I think I know where this is going to go, but I'm going to ask anyway, what's the easiest and the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, take my name from this show description, copy and paste it. If I just say Collin Strachan, you're going to spell it wrong. So go and look into Google, and our website will pop up, or LinkedIn will pop up, Kendall's Instagram will pop up. You can follow along wherever you want to.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate you, and keep doing the good work and enjoying the Alaska, wilderness and everything it has to offer.
Thank you so much. I will.
What an incredible conversation with Collin Strachan, a reminder that purpose and profit don't have to compete. From the wilds of Alaska to building a storytelling empire, Collin shows that courage and creativity can write what success looks like. If this episode sparks something in you, keep leaning into those bold ideas, and remember, true wealth starts with a mindset that gives you the freedom to live your story. Collin Strachan and all he's up to can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Midland Money Mindset. Remember, it's not just about the money, it's finding joy in the journey and embracing the right mindset. If you love the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Don't forget to follow along for more tips and inspiration. Please visit the social links below to connect with Larry or his guests. Until next time, keep smiling, keep thriving, and remember to think about, what did you do today that brought you joy?
The opinions voiced in the Midland Money Mindset Show with Lawrence Sprung are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy ensures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Guests on the Midland Money Mindset Show are not affiliated with CWM LLC.